Before we start the video, please don't be a Baka and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I will assure you your little effort will help me a lot. Now back to the video. On a cloudy day in a chicken restaurant, two people sit and have chicken drumsticks. One of them is a Sagittarius saint named Hugo, who tells the other person that he is going to die the next day. In response, the other person, a 13th awakened named Jian, does not take it seriously and asks why Hugo wants him to die so badly, calling him by the name Oteksu. In response, Hugo reminds Jian that his name is not Oteksu but Hugo, which causes Jian to laugh. After a while, Jian assures Hugo that he will not die so easily and tells him not to worry too much. Confident in his ability, Jian states that the number of calamities he has killed alone is way too much than all of the 12 saints combined. Hugo remains silent in response, although an expression of worry lingers on his face. We are then told about the Demon Tower, a dangerous place known as the spot where the worst calamity annihilated human lives. It all started on the last day of the 20th century, when calamities suddenly appeared, driving humans into a corner with overwhelming power. Just as humanity started to fall, the 12 divine beings appeared and promised to empower humans to overcome the calamities, and they selected 12 awakened individuals for that. However, unexpectedly, the 13th awakened appeared, who had not received any blessings from any of the divine beings. Surprisingly, this awakened individual was overwhelmingly strong and amazing compared to the rest of the 12 individuals, referred to as the 12 saints. This awakened person is Jian, the protagonist of the story and the one who made it possible for the 12 saints to conquer the Demon Tower. During their quest in the Demon Tower, Hugo, the Sagittarius saint, approaches Jian, commending him for his role in the conquest. In response, Jian, calling Hugo by the name Oteksu, states that he does not need lip service but fried chicken for the next 5 years, prompting Hugo to ask if he will never get sick of that. Hugo also reminds Jian that his name is Hugo, not Oteksu, causing Jian to remark that he can never get used to that name. Meanwhile, the other saints discuss how eliminating Crimson Eye will lead them to receive incredible rewards, expecting at least 100 billion won considering the calamities level. While they are talking about that, Jian intervenes, saying that they should at least settle for being able to stay in a 7-star hotel for the next 10 years. Putting on his face mask, he states that several countries are on the verge of bankruptcy due to the Crimson Eye. In response, one of the saints remarks that in order to make deals with them, Jian needs to have a lot of money to fix his damaged face and injured body. Leaving the conversation, the saints walk away while Jian stands behind, thinking that even though they are called saints, they are nothing more than thugs who only care about themselves. While he ponders that, they turn around once again, forbidding him from reaching any destroyed site immediately, saying that they need to create more victims to get a greater reward. Annoyed by their cruelty, Jian decides to sever all his connections with them once they defeat the Crimson Eye. Meanwhile, the other saints, who go ahead of him, reach a place in the tower and look ahead, feeling shocked. In front of them sits the formidable boss of the Demon Tower, the Crimson Eye, with fierce intent in its eyes. The monster is so dangerous that they all feel pressured by just a single gaze from it, which even leaves Jian surprised. While they contemplate how to defeat the monster, it lets out a loud roar, causing the entire tower to shake violently, leaving them shocked. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet as well as the walls of the tower begin to crack, followed by a blast that created havoc. As it continues to roar, the floor in the middle of the tower breaks, causing a huge surge of light to emerge from it, leading all the saints to fly up alongside the light. The intensity of the light is so high that it even breaks the roof of the tower and touches the sky. If you want to read this manhwa, you can read it on the sponsor of this video, the mangaexpert.com website. The link will be in the description. Feel free to check it out. Now let's resume the video. After some time, as the light begins to fade away, the saints tremble with fear as they stare in front of them. The floor of the tower in front of their eyes turns into a giant pit filled with lava. On the other side of the pit sits the formidable Crimson Eye on its throne with a cruel expression on its face. Engulfed in shock and trembling with fear, they get up to run away, considering that they cannot fight such a powerful monster and should save their lives instead. While they are running away, Jian looks back at them while standing in his place and ponders how such cowardly people can be called saints. Holding his sword tightly, he decides not to care about them, thinking that he will be the one to defeat the Crimson Eye. Thus, with fierce intent in his eyes, he smiles and leaves his spot, leaping up in the air to launch an attack on the monster. However, just as he launches the attack, he himself gets stabbed on his back and falls into a trap, where he remains for a long time, forgetting about the outside world. Considering that he doesn't have time to think about the world outside the tower, he keeps slaying formidable monsters endlessly. However, the surge of monsters never finishes because the trap he has fallen into keeps summoning infinite calamities. During this never-ending battle, he even loses one of his arms but still stands confidently in front of the monsters, holding a sword in his hand and a dagger in his mouth. He is still confident enough that the monsters' attacks will not be able to take his life, and he will surely survive. Just like this, he kept fighting against them for 20 years. After 20 years, he finally reaches the administrator of the monsters, who is shocked to find him there and asks how he managed to reach that point. Jian, now much older yet stronger, stands in front of it, and it feels scared, calling other monsters for help. Stating that there is no one left to help it no matter how much it screams, Jian uses his foot to crush the monster, causing it to die instantly. After killing the monster, Jian stands in front of it, wondering if the long battle is finally over and if he can finally get out of the tower. However, as he starts to walk away, he crashes to the ground, having lost all his energy, and gets engulfed by a strange darkness. Meanwhile, outside the tower, in the city that looks more like a destroyed arena, two children run to save their lives. While running, one of them says that he told the other one not to go there, and the other one replies that it was supposed to be safe that day. As they run away, they are followed by high-ranking calamities that seem to have appeared without any warning. After a short while, the calamities catch up to them, leading them to believe that their death is near. Just then, one of the monsters leaps up and collides with one of the children, causing him to crash to the ground. As they both sit powerless on the ground, more and more monsters start to gather around them. Feeling powerless, one of them wishes for Jian to have survived the demon tower, stating that if he were there, these calamities would not be a problem. Just then, the doors of the demon tower began to slowly open, leaving them shocked. Suddenly, a bright light emerges from the tower, followed by an earth-shattering blast that causes them to become confused. As the dust settles from the destructive blast, a large pit filled with lava emerges from within. Trapped under the rubble, the children ponder what it could be. Suddenly, one of them looks up in shock and urges the other to look in the same direction. In front of them stands a human figure emerging from the collapsed demon tower. This person, who turns out to be Jian, clenches his fists and expresses his anger towards those who betrayed him and led him into the trap. With fierce determination in his eyes, he declares that all those who deceived him will die at his hands. Concealed amidst the rubble of the fallen demon tower, the children sit in shock, witnessing the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. Meanwhile, Jian stands before their eyes, effortlessly slaying formidable monsters like insects with his bare hands. Watching him, the children express their astonishment, remarking that those are orange-class calamities that even highly ranked awakened individuals struggle to defeat. Yet, seeing Jian dispatch them like mere bugs is beyond belief for them. While they discuss amongst themselves, Jian suddenly senses their presence and turns towards them, suspecting that they might be monsters hiding within the rubble. In a sudden leap, he jumps into the air, confusing the children, and lands in front of them, removing the debris and exposing them, leaving them in shock. Frightened, the children start to retreat, trembling and wondering why he would attack them, causing Jian to realize that they are humans. Considering that, he thinks that everything has been cleaned up, causing the children to take a sigh of relief. As he surveys the surroundings, the children express their shock at the emergence of a human from the tower. However, one of them considers it impossible, believing that he happened to be in the area when the tower was collapsing. Suddenly, a gigantic shadow emerges behind them, followed by the appearance of a colossal boss monster. Witnessing this, the children are overcome by intense shock and decide to flee quickly, while Jian stands steadfast, smiling. With a fierce killing intent in its eyes, the monster opens its mouth and unleashes a powerful beam, causing the children to close their eyes in fear. The monster directs its devastating energy wave towards Jian and the children, shattering even the buildings in its path and unleashing massive destruction upon the city. After the wave subsides, the children emerge from the rubble they were hiding in, surprised to have survived, and look ahead in a state of shock. Standing before them is Jian, completely unharmed by the impact of the wave, leaving them bewildered. Wondering if he saved them, they observe as Jian leaps into the air towards the formidable boss monster and swiftly descends upon it. Unleashing a powerful wave of energy from his fist, Jian directs it towards the monster, causing it to crash to the ground, leaving the children in awe. Finally, when he reaches the ground, the boss monster is already lifeless, and the two boys stand frozen in shock. Believing that it is truly over this time, Jian looks at the two children behind him and calls out to them. Turning to face him, he instructs them to go, confusing them about where to go. Abruptly changing his expression to a lively one, Jian tells them to go and buy him some food, leaving them perplexed. He then adds that they should also buy him some clothes. Sometime later, in a fast food restaurant, Jian sets down an empty bowl of noodles on a table while the boys sitting in front of him gaze at the bill in astonishment. As they express their shock at how much he ate, Jian remarks that he held back a little because he doesn't have enough money, leaving them frustrated. Saying that they promised to buy him everything he wanted as a token of thanks, he turns to the waiter once again, asking for another bowl of soup, which makes the boy angry. Just then, one of them asks who he is and what he was doing around the tower. In response, Jian, who is busy picking his teeth, reveals that he came out of the tower, leaving them shocked. Changing the topic, he turns to the boy, asking who he is and stating that he does not seem like a normal person because he can sense magic in him. In response, the other one reveals that the boy named Jimin is a disciple and inquires if Jian is also a disciple who awakened with the blessings of the divine being. However, Jian disagrees, stating that he does not need to serve them. Just then, he notices his reflection in the spoon and feels shocked to see that his face is no longer as damaged as it used to be. Consumed by shock, he asks if there is a mirror somewhere, and the waiter directs him to it. Reaching the mirror, he removes his shirt and examines his body, feeling surprised to find his entire body recovered. Remembering how his skin, hair, and even teeth used to be severely damaged, he examines all those, thinking that those were difficult to recover without risking his strength. He also feels surprised to notice that his left arm, which was cut during the battle against monsters, is back. While examining his left arm, he suddenly notices a mark of a snake on his palm and wonders what it is. Suddenly, that mark turns into a real snake, causing intense pain in his body and leaving him shocked. Just then, he is informed that because he experienced death, all his achievements will be passed on to a new body, and his zodiac skills will enable him to use the power of Ophiuchus. Just then, he slowly opens his eyes and then closes them once again, getting transported into an open space. When he opens his eyes again, he finds himself floating in space in front of a gigantic snake. Feeling shocked and confused, he extends his arm to touch the snake, and as soon as his hand makes contact, the snake's body begins to emanate a bright light. As the glow becomes brighter, he suddenly finds himself back in front of the mirror, sitting on the floor with his body sweating. Confused, he stares at his reflection when the boys, standing in front of him, ask if he is okay. Turning to them, he asks if they did not see the gigantic snake. In response, Jimin states that he did not, and Jian just took off his shirt, ran to the mirror, and later grabbed his wrist and screamed. Looking at the mark of the snake on his palm, Jian wonders if others were not able to see it, while the boys stand quietly, thinking of him as strange. Just then, the bright light emerges in front of him once again, notifying him that he has become the master of Ophiuchus. As he stands still above the bright light, countless notifications begin to rush in, informing him that he has gained a super regeneration skill along with a 50% decrease in his physical ability. This makes him realize that his physical change was a result of the super regeneration skill, thinking that the saints never told him that they could see such windows. Also, he cannot feel the presence of any divine beings, yet, considering that his body has recovered, he does not think of it as a bad thing. Therefore, he decides to kill all the saints that ran away from the tower and seek revenge from the person who stabbed him in the back. Therefore, he becomes excited for the quest, leaving the boys trembling with fear due to his strange personality. Meanwhile, news of the demon tower collapsing spreads throughout the city, attracting numerous agencies and broadcasters. Gathering around the rubble of the destroyed building, they consider it a significant event for the entire world. Observing the pile of rubble, people speculate that the demolished tower was a landmark of the place, pondering whether Li Jian's followers, the disciples who hated him, were responsible. However, as they look at the dead monsters, they doubt that even the higher-ranking disciples could have achieved such a feat and wonder who killed them and destroyed the demon tower. Contemplating this, they question if Jian truly survived in the tower and returned, deciding to wait and see in order to confirm. Meanwhile, in a large building, a ceremony goes on with countless cameras focused on a person named Yang Wei. Turning to him, reporters start inquiring about his thoughts on the tower's collapse and whether there is a chance that Li Jian is still alive. In response, Yang Wei, the Aries saint, refuses to address the question and walks away. While sitting in the car to depart, he vents his frustration upon hearing Li Jian's name mentioned countless times that day. He considers Jian's survival and his 20-year stay in the tower impossible, believing that defeating countless black-ranked demonic beasts would have been unachievable. Puffing on his cigar, he believes that escaping from there could only happen by miracle, an impossible feat for anyone. He reassures himself that Jian's body has already been ravaged by the recoil of his power and that he hasn't received any blessings from divine beings like the saints. However, he still fears that if Jian has indeed survived, it would be disastrous for them, as everything would be over. Meanwhile, Jian, who is busy watching something on the phone, decides to eliminate one specific person first. At an airport in England, an aeroplane lands, and a person emerges from it, receiving a warm welcome from the people who consider it an honor to meet him. The person turns out to be Hugo, the Sagittarius saint and Jian's best friend. Exiting the aeroplane, Hugo inquires about the Prime Minister's location and is informed that he is waiting at his residence with a vehicle prepared to take him there. Upon hearing this, Hugo instructs them to head directly there, proceeding ahead while the people standing there consider him to be very dignified. Observing his humble personality, they believe that a person like him is a true chosen one. While traveling in a car towards the Prime Minister's residence, Hugo remains quiet, gazing out of the window, when suddenly his phone starts ringing. Assuming the call to be from reporters, as before, Hugo becomes frustrated, perceiving their continued involvement in the conspiracy theories surrounding Jian's survival. The constant ringing from an unknown number irritates him, and he flips his phone, remarking that it has already been 20 years. Afterwards, he resumes looking outside, reminiscing about the time he told Jian he would die the next day, but Jian ignored it as a joke that could never come true. He remembers that during the raid on the Demon Tower, he was taking care of the monsters outside the tower at Jian's request. He prayed a lot for his prophecy to prove wrong and for Jian to return alive. However, the other saints abandoned him, leaving him inside, only to return with the head of the Crimson Eye. As a result, their achievements were widely acknowledged, and they were regarded as heroes who gained a lot of power and authority. However, Hugo was never ready to believe that Jian really died and requested the search of the tower countless times. However, the other saints refused to do that, stating that he should know about the danger of emerging monsters and calling the fact that Jian was alive nonsensical. They told him that if he wants to look for him desperately, he can go inside alone, but it would only lead to his death, reducing the number of saints to 11. This both enraged and discouraged him from entering the tower again, despite desperately wanting to do so. Remembering that time, Hugo feels remorseful and continues to look out of the car, thinking that no matter how strong Jian is, his survival is impossible and it is already too late. While he is thinking about that, he receives a call from the Prime Minister and picks it up, asking what the matter is. In response, the Prime Minister begins to discuss the same incident of the Demon Tower falling. Holding his head in frustration, Hugo realizes that the Prime Minister also intends to discuss the same. Therefore, he apologizes to the Prime Minister in advance, saying that if they want him to search for Jian, he is refusing to do so. He shares his belief that Jian died in the Demon Tower, and the people behind this incident might be his followers. He thinks that the Prime Minister is trying to use that issue for his election votes, but the Prime Minister declines, saying that this is not the case. He reveals that according to the news that he has just received from the Korean government, the call that rang a few moments ago on Hugo's phone was from Jian, leaving Hugo bewildered. Consumed by intense shock, Hugo begins to shout and tells the driver to immediately stop the car, which he does. Sitting in the car, he looks at his phone, considering it to be unbelievable and wondering if the calls were really from Jian. He picks up the phone and looks at its screen, which displays 30 missed calls and a voicemail, which intensifies his shock. After a while, he clicks on the voicemail and brings the phone near his ear. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice addressing him as Oteksu, telling him that he will find him and kill him and wishing him good luck. Frozen in disbelief, Hugo thinks that it cannot be true and wonders if it is really Jian. He then tells the driver to immediately turn around the car, saying that they will go back to the airport, ignoring his business in England. Meanwhile, in the fast food restaurant, Jian sits holding his phone, thinking that Hugo really grew up and learned how to ignore his calls. Looking at him, the boys inquire endlessly about whom he was calling, and he says that they will soon know. Looking at the phone, which he previously did not know about, he considers it to be an interesting gadget. Stating that it was 2005 when he entered the tower, he realizes it is already 2025 and the world has become better, while the boys inform him that he can also use the internet and watch news. Interested, Jian asks if he can also read the articles about Li Jian, and they agree, stating that those articles are trending at the moment. Saying that, Jimin gets up and clicks on his phone's screen, opening countless articles about Jian, making him surprised. However, reading the comments about him, he realizes that people consider him useless and think that Crimson Eye was defeated by the 12 Saints, which leads him to get enraged. Clenching the phone tightly, he states that the 12 Saints were the ones who got scared and ran away, feeling intense anger while Jimin starts to worry about his phone. However, Jian decides to maintain his composure, becoming calm once again and continuing to browse. Suddenly, he comes across an article discussing Li Jian's decision to donate all his property to charity and wonders if that was kept well. However, as he clicks on the article, he learns that the 12 Saints announced his death after leaving the tower and claimed that he passed on all his property to them in order to save humanity. This resulted in all of them, except Sagittarius, receiving a share in his property. Feeling an intense surge of anger after discovering this, Jian finally shatters the phone with his hand, vowing to kill them all and cut them to pieces. Seeing the phone get destroyed, Jimin starts to cry hard. Meanwhile, Jian wonders what to do, thinking that although he wants to announce his return, his appearance has changed a lot, and people will not believe him even if he tells them. Therefore, he decides to stay quiet and deal with the Saints one by one, while Jimin keeps crying, holding his broken phone. While the other boy is calming him, Jian sits quietly with a strange energy slowly surrounding him without him noticing. Just then, he gets a notification that someone is watching him, leading him to realize the source of it. Therefore, he gets up and starts heading out, causing the children to ask where he is going. He replies that he is only going out to get some fresh air. As he goes outside, he notices countless demon-like creatures surrounding the restaurant and wonders if they are the underlings of Ares. Just then, he receives a notification that these creatures are creating a barrier and decreasing the influence of other zodiac signs, along with a request for a tribute. This enrages him, and he decides to teach them a lesson. Just then, he hears someone's voice calling his name, expressing their frustration at hearing it everywhere, and he turns around to see two people coming his way. While he watches them with confusion, one of them states that he has gotten all the attention in the news and wonders why it is happening despite him being a lost case. Looking at their badges with the sign of the Gemini zodiac on them, Jimin recognizes them to be from the Gemini divine cadre and starts to feel anxious. Noticing Jian, the people suddenly stop, while Jimin tells Jian to come back inside, stating that he should not get into an argument with those people. Just then, one of the two asks why he is blocking their way, telling him to go away, leading Jimin to realize that they cannot stop what is about to happen. Just then, the person who is smoking the cigarette takes in the smoke and exhales it on Jian's face. As he stands still in response, the person gets near him, asking if he is angry and telling him to try and hit him if he really is angry. While he is still standing quietly in response, the girl tells the person to leave him, stating that he might be scared. So, they begin to move away, stating that losers like him are the ones who like Li Jian. While he is standing, trying his best to control his anger, they keep commenting on Jian being the weakest compared to the 12 Saints. Just then, Jimin and his friend approach him, appreciating his efforts to keep himself composed. However, the very next moment, Jian bursts into anger and turns to the Gemini disciples, addressing them as roaches. Surprised as well as enraged, they turn back, asking if he really called them roaches, and he loudly agrees, calling them a couple of cockroaches once again. Coming back towards him, the individual asks him to repeat his words once more, referring to him as a mere ordinary person from whom he cannot even sense a trace of mana. While he is saying this, Jian extends his finger towards the person's forehead and lightly flicks it, causing the person to crash back to the ground. Witnessing this, the person's partner and the boys are filled with immense shock, while Jian stands confidently with a smile on his face. At that moment, the girl, who was previously in a state of shock, begins to counterattack. In response, Jian smiles and remarks that she was mistaken to think he would not notice her actions from behind. Turning around at a swift speed, he flicks her with his finger as well, causing her to crash to the ground just like her partner. After doing that, he confidently states that they did not even amount to that much. Addressing him, the boys worriedly ask how he can use his abilities in the middle of the street. In response, he turns around and explains that they would have been dead if he had employed his true abilities. Realizing that he has defeated the A-ranked disciples with just a single flick of his finger, the children are left in profound shock. Meanwhile, Jian approaches the Gemini disciple, sits down beside him, and observes the necklace he is wearing. Taking the necklace off his neck, Jian holds it in his hand and expresses that he felt an odd sensation while striking the person, which he attributes to the necklace. He then turns to the children and inquires if it is a divine artifact, wondering why individuals like them possess such artifacts that are typically exclusive to saints. Surprisingly, the children ask if he truly knows nothing, revealing that humanity nearly faced extinction from past calamities several decades ago. As a result, due to the difficulty of relying solely on 12 individuals to save humanity, the saints gathered followers and established divine cadres. They explained that those awakened by the saints and granted power are called disciples, ranked in accordance with their strength and faith, all under the leadership of the saints. They further disclosed that selected disciples receive gifts from divine beings based on their devotion. This revelation makes Jian realize the immense changes that have occurred in the world during his 20-year absence. Just then, Jimin calls out to him, urging him to look aside, and he turns to see the same divine creatures floating in the air surrounding them. Simultaneously, he receives a notification that these creatures are enjoying the situation, urging him to eliminate the two individuals and promising a useful reward in return. Observing this, Jimin is shocked, realizing that he has captured the attention of the divine beings' households, which are like their shadows, opposing whom means opposing the divine beings. Taking this into consideration, Jimin implores Jian to comply with their demands and do as they say. In response, Jian realizes that the underlings of Aries are in a place like that, striving to satisfy their hunger, just like Yang Wei himself. Consequently, he raises one of his feet, thinking that Yang Wei hasn't changed at all, and forcefully stomps it onto the ground. This results in generating a powerful wave that causes the divine creatures to disperse as if caught in a storm. The impact of this wave reaches the sky, forcing the divine creatures to flee, while Jian remains steadfast, questioning how they dared to confront him. Recognizing that such formidable demonic creatures have retreated and the barriers have vanished, Jimin comprehends that Jian is not an ordinary person. Turning to Jimin, Jian repeats their claim that the person he knocked out a while ago is the disciple of Gemini. In response, Jimin agrees and reveals that they are from the Divine Cadre, the most influential force in the country, and an elite force consisting of several influential figures. Considering that, Jian thinks that these people must have a lot of money, which he can see from the branded clothes and belongings of that person. Therefore, he reaches out to that person again and starts taking all his belongings away, leaving the boys shocked. After spending a long day outside, the boys finally reach their apartments, accompanied by Jian. Pointing towards a colossal building in front of him, Jimin tells Jian about where his apartment is while his friend points to the one he lives in. After that, both of them turn to Jian, and Jimin thanks him for saving their lives and bringing them home safely. However, when he does not get any response for a few moments, he opens his eyes. In front of him, Jian stands yawning and asks if he is not going to go inside, stating that he is sleepy, making him realize that Jian intends to follow him to his house. After a while inside the house, Jian changes his clothes and cuts down his long hair, thereby undergoing a complete transformation in his appearance. After that, he comes out, and Jimin remarks that his new appearance is amazing while feeling surprised that he cut his hair. He remembers that in the past, every single strand of hair was precious to him since he kept losing hair as a side effect of his abilities. Remembering that, he feels glad at the opportunity to be able to style his hair like that. Just then, he notices something and turns aside, finding a small mosquito-like calamity and asking what a calamity like it is doing in his house. Without even turning to it, he uses his hand to effortlessly crush it, leaving Jimin surprised at his ability and thinking that even professionals would not be able to kill it. However, when such tiny calamities keep appearing and coming to him, Jian feels frustrated, while Jimin states that he might be emitting a scent that calamities are attracted to. However, Jian thinks that something in this house is attracting them and turns aside to look for it. On one of the racks, he finds certain evil artifacts placed and states that it is because of those that the calamities keep coming. In response, Jimin reveals that he received those items directly from the Gemini Saint. Holding one of the statues in his hand, Jimin states that these things are blessed by the saint, when Jian suddenly breaks it. While Jian stands, remarking that it is disgusting, Jimin sits on the floor, unable to believe that such a precious statue has been destroyed. Jian then takes a mask from among those items and asks Jimin if this is the artifact that monitors its buyer. Following that, he goes to the rack and begins examining all those pieces of equipment, throwing them away one by one, while Jimin continues to stare at him in disbelief. After looking at all those things, Jian realizes that the saints have not only stolen his money but are also selling evil artifacts to people and feeding off others. Feeling very angry just at the thought of it, Jian tells him to throw all those away. Meanwhile, a person who is standing outside the door hears their voices coming from inside. While Jian is busy breaking the divine artifacts one by one, despite Jimin protesting, the person enters the house, feeling surprised. Looking at him, Jian asks who he is, while Jimin feels glad to see him. In response to Jian's question, the person reveals that he is the owner of this house, causing Jian to stop his acts. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, the Baka Senpai.